for this one, this will be a class 2 partial denture, a unilateral edentulous saddle. The patient has a premolar abutment and molar abutments. And in this case again, this will be my metal partial denture, which is always a first choice in lower partial dentures. We will follow exactly the same steps again to ensure that all the components are there, that I've satisfied the principles of a partial denture. I have surveyed my model. This is my drawing, the two-dimensional drawing of the arch form that I have. And I will have guide planes on the premolar, unless I'm using an RPI system, which we can also use. The next step is to provide support. As usual, always 3 rests on a denture and a minimum of 2 clasps. So in this case, because I have a premolar, I'm going to use an RPI system, because RPI systems have been designed for distal extension partial dentures. So in this case, I'm going to use a lingual plate, and I will show you a lingual bar on another design. In this case, I said I'm going to use an RPI system, so I'm going to use a mesial rest. I'm going to use my second rest on my molar, and I must use a third rest. Remember, I'm saying I'm going to use a lingual plate because I do not have adequate length in the sulcus. So I will use a third rest on a canine, which can either be the 4-3 or the 3-3. So I've got my 1, 2, 3 and 4 rests. The next step is to provide retention. I'm going to use my circumferential clasp on a molar, and I'm using a reciprocal arm again. Circumferential clasp again has 3 components. It has a rest, an active arm engaging undercut, always 0.25 undercut, and it has a reciprocal arm. I'm going to use a gingivally approaching clasp on this one. I've got my rest, and this one I'm going to then have my gingivally approaching clasp that will be attached to my framework. So I've got my 1, 2 clasps, and now I have to connect the separate components. Again, this will be a lingual plate. So the lingual plate is covering all the teeth. So I've indicated that my gingivally approaching clasp is a chrome cobalt and therefore also engaging 0.25 undercut only. It's chrome cobalt, which is a rigid material. Have to indicate where my acrylic is going to be attached. I have provided enough horizontal stability. I have covered all the teeth because it's a lingual plate. I've designed a circumferential clasp on a molar engaging 0.25 undercut. A gingivally approaching clasp, so I'm using an RPI principle of a mesial rest, gingivally approaching clasp, and I've got my third rest on either one or both of the canines. And this will be my class 2 partial denture. Another design will be a metal partial denture. In this design, I have used a lingual bar because I've got adequate space, and remember, lingual bar is always the first choice provided I have adequate space. Because I've used a lingual bar, I've now used a distal rest on my premolar because I need 1, 2, 3 rests. Remember, all partial dentures must have a minimum of 3 rests. In the third quadrant, I have decided to use a stainless steel clasp that is soldered onto my metal, and I have used a reciprocating arm using the chrome cobalt to reciprocate the action of the C clasp. I've used a circumferential clasp on the molar, and my third rest. The third rest is always to provide indirect retention on the distal of the premolar. And I have designed a lingual bar, so I have cleared all the teeth. And this is the advantage of metal partial dentures, that we can actually relieve all the teeth. If we look at the design of a acrylic partial denture again, this is now my acrylic partial denture. We can see that we have to cover all the teeth to provide adequate bulk for my acrylic partial denture. I have used a C-clasp again, engaging distal buccal undercut. And because this clasp is going over the embrasure between the molar and the premolar, it also acts as an embrasure rest. So I will also, when I add or count my 3 rests, I will also count this embrasure clasp or the embrasure rest. I've used a stainless steel clasp on the premolar with my distal rest, which is half round wire. So when I look at I've got 1, 2 clasps, I've got reciprocation. Reciprocation is provided by the acrylic partial denture, and I've got my 1, 2, 3 rests, because this clasp also acts or can be counted as an embrasure rest. And this is an acrylic partial denture for a class 2.